There comes a moment in every human life when the inner world begins to grow faster than the outer one. You start to see things differently. You begin to understand what once confused you, and gradually you realize you are no longer the same person you once were. This is what we call outgrowing, not in arrogance, not in superiority, but in expansion. The great danger is not that you are changing, but that the world around you may not change with you. You see, most people are committed to their patterns. They repeat the same emotions, the same thoughts, the same fears, as if life were a loop instead of a flowing river. But when you begin to awaken, when your awareness stretches beyond old limitations, you start to feel a separation. Not because you want to leave them behind, but because you are being pulled towards something larger, something more alive. And this creates a kind of loneliness. You look around and think, why does no one else see what I see? The danger here is subtle. You might begin to shrink yourself just to fit back into the old circle. You may silence your thoughts because they no longer resonate with the conversations around you. You may pretend not to notice the truth because truth can be uncomfortable for those who still cling to illusion. And slowly, if you are not careful, you begin to dim your own light to protect the comfort of others. This is the first danger, betraying your own evolution. Another danger is believing that because you have outgrown people, they are somehow less than you. Growth is not a hierarchy, it is simply movement. Some move inward, some move outward, some move not at all. But consciousness does not grow so that you can stand above others. It grows so that you can see more clearly. If you mistake height for superiority, you lose the very essence of awakening. For the moment you boast about how far you've come, you have already fallen back into the smallness you thought you had escaped. Life, you see, is not about keeping pace with those around you, nor is it about forcing others to keep pace with you. It is about honoring your path while understanding that every soul unfolds at its own rhythm. Imagine a tree feeling guilty because it grew taller than the others. It would be absurd. The tree simply grows because that is its nature, and in doing so, it gives shade, it gives air, it gives beauty. Growth is not selfish unless you make it so. But perhaps the deepest danger is isolation. Not the physical kind, but the spiritual kind. When you outgrow everyone around you, you may feel tempted to withdraw from the world entirely, to hide in your clarity, to float alone in your peace. Yet wisdom is not found in escaping humanity, but in engaging with it without losing yourself. Your growth was never meant to separate you from life. It was meant to return you to it with new eyes. So when you find yourself outgrowing the familiar, do not cling, do not shrink, and do not flee. Allow the transformation to happen and understand that the loneliness you feel is not emptiness. It is space. Space for new people, new experiences, new dimensions of yourself. Outgrowing others does not mean abandoning love. It means expanding it. And those who are meant to walk with you will rise to meet you, not because you dragged them there, but because your growth inspired their own. In this way, outgrowing everyone around you is not a curse, but a calling to become who you truly are, even if you must walk alone for a while. For the path of awakening has always been walked in solitude, but never in separation. Outgrowing others is often misunderstood as an act of ego, as if one is declaring themselves better or more important. But in truth, outgrowing is a natural expansion of awareness, a quiet unfolding that happens within a person when they begin to see life from a wider, deeper perspective. Just as a child grows out of old clothes, the mind and spirit sometimes grow out of old patterns, relationships, or environments. There is nothing arrogant about change. Change is simply what life does when it is alive, yet society often treats growth as a threat, especially when it disrupts the comfort of sameness. When you begin to think independently, question deeply, or live more consciously, others may label it as pride or distance. But what is actually happening is a natural widening of your inner horizon. Imagine living in a small room your whole life. It is familiar, safe, predictable. Then one day, a window opens, revealing a vast landscape outside. Once you have seen that wider world, you cannot pretend the room is the entire universe anymore. You may still appreciate it, but you cannot limit yourself to it. This is what happens when awareness expands. You begin to understand emotions you once suppressed. You start to see the patterns behind people's behavior. You sense energies and intentions that were invisible before. You notice the difference between love and attachment, between peace and silence, between being busy and being fulfilled. It is not that you think you are above others. It is that you now perceive more than you once did. However, the danger lies not in the expansion itself, but in how it is interpreted by you and by others. You must understand that growth is not a moral achievement, not a measure of worth, but a natural movement of consciousness. A flower does not bloom to outshine the other flowers. It blooms because blooming is written into its nature. In the same way, you evolve because the inner seasons of your life require it. When you keep this in mind, you avoid the trap of superiority. Growth brings clarity, but clarity should not turn into judgment. If you look at those who have not evolved in the same direction and call them less awakened, you have misunderstood the purpose of awareness. True expansion brings humility, not comparison. And yet it is equally important not to mistake other people's discomfort as a sign that you are doing something wrong. Often when you change, the people around you react from fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of losing the familiar version of you, or fear of confronting their own unchanging patterns. They may accuse you of drifting away when in reality you are simply moving forward. You must remember that your growth is not an insult to anyone, it is simply your path. You are not responsible for shrinking your light to keep others comfortable, nor for forcing others to grow at your pace. Outgrowing others is not a rejection. It is an evolution. It means your thoughts, your emotions, your inner truth have become too spacious for the old container. You may still love the people you once walked with, but love does not always mean staying the same. Sometimes growth demands new surroundings, new conversations, new levels of honesty. Sometimes it means letting go with compassion rather than holding on with fear. What truly matters is how you carry this expansion. Walk gently, speak with kindness. Allow your growth to be a quiet example rather than a loud declaration. A person who has truly expanded does not need to prove it. They radiate it. They live with softness, with awareness, with a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. They know that outgrowing others is not about rising above anyone, but about rising into themselves. One of the greatest dangers in the process of outgrowing the people around you is the subtle temptation to shrink yourself, just to fit back into the world you've evolved beyond. This shrinking doesn't happen in dramatic ways. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. You begin to tone down your insights because you fear being misunderstood. You soften your truth because others find it uncomfortable. You pretend you don't notice things you clearly see, simply to maintain harmony. At first, this feels harmless, a small compromise for the sake of connection. But over time, it becomes a pattern of self-betrayal, a habit of dimming your own awareness so others don't feel overwhelmed by it. When you grow internally, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you begin to operate from a broader understanding of life. You recognize unhealthy patterns you once overlooked. You sense when conversations lack depth or when relationships drain more than they nourish. You become aware of subtle energy shifts, hidden motives, and emotional undercurrents in ways you couldn't before. But instead of embracing this new clarity, you may feel pressure to pretend you're still the old version of yourself, the one people were comfortable with. You might laugh at things you no longer find amusing, engage in gossip you've spiritually outgrown, or stay silent when your soul urges you to speak. This is how shrinking begins, not in defiance of your growth, but in fear of losing belonging. The danger is that shrinking feels easier than standing alone. Humans are wired for connection, and the fear of being isolated or misunderstood can make you second-guess your evolution. Some people around you may interpret your growth as rejection. They may tell you that you've changed, and not in a good way. They may accuse you of thinking too deeply, being too sensitive, or wanting too much out of life. If you are not rooted firmly in your own journey, you may internalize these judgments and begin to doubt the validity of your transformation. You might start editing yourself to match their expectations, forgetting that evolution is supposed to move you forward, not backward. But every time you shrink, you pay a price. Each compromise chips away at your authenticity. Each time you silence your truth, a part of your inner voice goes quiet. When you consistently reduce your light to fit the dimness around you, you eventually forget how brightly you were capable of shining. What begins as a small adjustment eventually becomes a disconnect between who you are and who you pretend to be. You feel it as a heaviness, a subtle sadness, a sense that something within you is being suppressed. Your intuition weakens. Your joy dulls. Your energy becomes scattered. This is not because your growth was wrong, but because resisting your growth is exhausting. The world often tries to keep people at the level that benefits its comfort, not their evolution. But life does not expand when you stay small. It expands when you trust your inner unfolding, even if others don't understand. You must remember that your purpose is not to maintain old versions of yourself for the sake of nostalgia or acceptance. Your purpose is to become the fullest expression of who you are meant to be. Shrinking may preserve relationships, but it destroys your relationship with yourself. And no external connection is worth the cost of abandoning your own inner truth. When you refuse to shrink, you invite others quietly, naturally, to rise to their own potential. And even if they choose not to, you honor your path, your awareness, and the expansion life intended for you. Another danger that arises when you outgrow the people around you is the subtle shift where growth, if misunderstood, transforms into arrogance or judgment. Expansion of awareness should make you more compassionate, not more superior. Yet many people fall into the trap of believing that because they see more, feel more, or understand more, they must be more. This is where growth becomes distorted, not by the evolution itself, but by the ego's attachment to the idea of being ahead. True wisdom humbles you, but partial awakening can make you feel above those who have not walked the same path. When you begin to grow in consciousness, it's natural to feel proud of how far you've come. You've battled your inner shadows, questioned deeply held beliefs, and learned lessons that took courage to face. But the danger lies in forgetting that every soul evolves at its own pace, and the timeline of another's growth is not for you to judge. Just because you've outgrown certain patterns or relationships does not mean that those who still live within them are foolish or unaware. They are simply experiencing life through the lens they are meant to at this moment. Arrogance often disguises itself as clarity. You might look at someone who is still stuck in their fears or insecurities and think you've moved beyond them. You might feel impatient when people repeat behaviors you've already learned from. You may begin to see yourself as evolved and others as asleep. Yet this very viewpoint is a sign that the ego has hijacked your awakening. A mind that truly understands the nature of growth recognizes that no one is behind or ahead. Everyone is exactly where they need to be for their own unfoldment. If you allow superiority to shape your perspective, your growth, instead of liberating you, becomes a cage of judgment. You start distancing yourself from people not because your soul needs distance, but because your ego needs validation. You withdraw from conversations not with peace, but with silent criticism. You lose the ability to listen, to empathize, to connect. Suddenly, your awakening becomes a weapon rather than a gift. The irony is that the moment you begin to feel superior for being more aware, you stop being aware. Awareness requires humility, the understanding that you too were once unaware, that you too acted out of fear, and that you too hurt others when you hadn't yet learned better. Growth is not a straight line upward. It's a continuous cycle of learning, forgetting, relearning, and surrendering. If you judge others harshly for where they are in their cycle, you fail to honor your own humanity. True growth softens you. It makes you gentler, quieter, more patient. It makes you look at someone still stuck in a pattern and feel understanding rather than irritation. It makes you realize that no one resists growth intentionally. Most people simply fear the unknown or cling to what once kept them safe. And if you have outgrown what others are still navigating, it does not make you superior. It simply means your lessons arrived sooner. Another hidden danger is isolating yourself because you believe others cannot meet your level of consciousness. This illusion feeds the ego, convincing you that you walk alone because you are too evolved for ordinary company. Yet a truly awakened mind knows that wisdom can speak gently even in simple conversations. That connection does not require sameness, and that every person carries something to teach if you're willing to look deeper. Growth becomes harmful when it separates you from humanity instead of connecting you to it. The purpose of awakening is not to rise above others, but to rise above the illusions that separate you from them. There is no pedestal in true wisdom. There is only understanding, compassion, and the quiet recognition that we are all evolving, each at the pace our soul can handle. Every person grows at their own pace. Evolution is not a competition. This truth is simple, yet profoundly difficult for the human mind to embrace. We live in a world that measures everything: success, intelligence, achievement, even emotional healing, as if life were a race where everyone must reach the same milestones at the same time. But inner growth does not follow a clock. It does not unfold according to society's expectations, nor does it respond to the pressure of comparison. It happens when the soul is ready, when experience has ripened, and when understanding finds the right moment to break open within you. When you begin to outgrow the people around you, the temptation to compare becomes strong. You notice they still react to situations you have learned to detach from. They still chase validation you no longer seek. They hold on to illusions you have already questioned. And it can be easy to think, why aren't they learning faster? Why can't they see what I see? But this mindset is not only unfair to them, it is unkind to the natural rhythm of growth itself. Every person's inner world unfolds according to their own emotional history, their own wounds, their own lessons, and the timing their heart can bear. Consider how flowers in a garden bloom. Some open in early spring, others wait till summer, and some don't unfold until the final warmth of autumn. Yet no one looks at a late blooming flower and says it is inferior. It is simply living according to its own timing. The same is true of people. You might be flowering now, while someone you care about is still gathering the strength to sprout. Another might be in the quiet season of winter, preparing for a transformation that hasn't yet begun. Growth is not linear. It is seasonal, cyclical, layered, and deeply personal. The danger of forgetting this is that impatience can turn into frustration, and frustration can turn into judgment. If you expect others to grow at your pace, you'll constantly feel disappointed. You may even distance yourself prematurely, believing they are unwilling to evolve, when in truth they are simply evolving differently. Some people grow through introspection, others through pain, others through relationships, and some through silence. No two paths look alike, and no one's pace reflects their worth. Understanding this principle brings a profound sense of peace. You stop trying to rush people. You stop forcing conversations they are not ready for. You stop expecting them to understand lessons you learned only through your unique experiences. Instead, you begin to respect the mystery of their journey. You realize that just as you had your own moments of confusion, denial, and awakening, so will they when life decides the time is right. When you honor someone's pace, you create space for genuine connection rather than pressure-filled expectations. You allow them to be human. You allow them to stumble, to fall behind, to take detours. You learn to support without controlling, to guide without imposing, and to love without demanding uniformity. This is one of the highest forms of compassion. And you also free yourself. You free yourself from the arrogance of believing you must drag others into enlightenment. You free yourself from the guilt of moving forward. You free yourself from the burden of trying to synchronize your evolution with everyone else's. When you accept that growth is not a competition, you stop trying to rank yourself in it. You understand that your journey is uniquely yours, not faster, not slower, just yours. People will rise in their own time. Some may catch up. Some may walk beside you again. Some may take longer routes that you will never fully understand. And some may never choose the path you've taken at all. But that does not make any path wrong. It simply reflects the beautiful diversity of human experience. In the end, evolution is not about who reaches awareness first. It's about each soul awakening when it is ready, when it is brave enough, and when it finally hears the whisper that calls it forward. Isolation can arise when you outgrow the people around you, but wisdom lies in staying connected without losing yourself. This experience of isolation is one of the quietest and most misunderstood phases of personal evolution. As your awareness grows, you begin to notice things you once ignored. You crave conversations with depth rather than drama, and suddenly the world around you feels different, sometimes too small, sometimes too loud, and sometimes simply misaligned with who you are becoming. This shift can create a sense of loneliness, not because you are truly alone, but because few people now resonate with the frequency of your inner world. When you start thinking differently, seeing differently, and feeling differently, it is natural to sense a growing distance between yourself and the people who were once close to you. But this distance is not born from rejection, it is born from evolution. You find that old friendships revolve around cycles you've outgrown. You notice that certain conversations no longer nourish you but drain you. You may even feel like an outsider among the people you used to feel at home with. This is the loneliness that accompanies growth. The feeling of standing on a new mountain while everyone else remains in a valley you no longer wish to return to. But here lies the danger. Many people respond to this loneliness by withdrawing too much. They mistake solitude for isolation, silence for avoidance, and independence for emotional distance. They start building walls instead of boundaries. They disconnect because connection feels exhausting, or they fear being misunderstood, judged, or dismissed for the depth they now carry. This can lead to spiritual isolation, a state where you keep your wisdom locked inside because sharing it feels pointless or painful. Yet wisdom was never meant to be hidden. Growth does not ask you to separate from humanity. It asks you to relate to it more consciously. The key is learning how to stay connected without shrinking yourself, without abandoning your truth, and without expecting others to match your level of awareness. You do not have to isolate yourself to preserve your growth. You simply have to interact differently. Staying connected means engaging with others from a place of compassion rather than frustration. It means recognizing that just because someone cannot meet you at your depth does not mean they have nothing to offer. A person may not understand your insights, but they may still offer kindness, joy, humor, or loyalty. Not every connection needs to be profound to be meaningful. Some relationships nourish the heart, some stimulate the mind, and some simply remind you of your humanity. It also means learning to hold space for people without trying to change them. When you grow, it becomes tempting to become a teacher to everyone, to want to elevate their consciousness because you believe it will free them. But forcing growth on others only creates friction. Staying connected requires patience, allowing people to be who they are while you remain who you are, without expecting one to collapse into the other. Maintaining connection while honoring your growth also requires strong boundaries. Not walls, not avoidance, but clarity. You can love people without participating in toxicity. You can remain kind without being drained. You can stay present without sacrificing your peace. Wisdom is not in turning away from the world, but in engaging with it with new eyes, new choices, and new awareness. And perhaps most importantly, staying connected means finding or creating spaces where your expanded self is welcomed. Not everyone will understand your evolution, but some will. Some souls are aligned with who you are becoming, not who you were. As you outgrow certain spaces, new spaces will call to you. Places where depth is normal, awareness is shared, and growth is celebrated instead of questioned. Isolation is not a requirement of awakening. It is merely a phase you pass through before you learn how to stand in your truth while remaining open to the world. Wisdom teaches you how to walk among others without losing yourself, how to speak your truth without fear, and how to remain connected without compromising your evolution. Outgrowing others creates space for new relationships and experiences aligned with your higher self. This is one of the most beautiful yet challenging truths of personal evolution. When you grow beyond the people, environments, and versions of yourself that once felt familiar, it can initially feel like loss. You may feel as if you are drifting away from everything you once knew. But what often goes unnoticed is that this very process is clearing emotional, mental, and spiritual space for connections and experiences that match who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Life has a way of expanding when you do. The more you evolve, the more your inner world needs external experiences that resonate with your new level of understanding. When you hold on tightly to people or situations that no longer reflect your values, your energy becomes divided. Part of you is trying to move forward while another part clings to what feels familiar. This creates resistance. But when you allow yourself to release what has already served its purpose, you make room for relationships and opportunities that meet you where you are now. It can be difficult to let go. Even when you sense that certain connections are no longer aligned with your growth, your heart often hesitates. You remember shared memories, shared laughter, shared versions of yourself. But growth asks you to honor the present version of who you are, not the past version others still expect you to be. And when you honor your truth, life brings people whose energy, depth, and awareness mirror yours in ways you haven't experienced before. New relationships formed after growth tend to feel lighter, more natural. They do not require you to shrink your thoughts or silence your intuition. They do not demand that you pretend to care about things you've evolved beyond. Instead, they encourage your expansion. They challenge you in healthy ways. They bring new perspectives, new inspirations, new ways of thinking. These people may not always appear immediately, but they arrive exactly when your energy becomes ready for them. In the same way, new experiences begin to enter your life when you stop forcing yourself into old roles. You may find yourself drawn to environments, hobbies, opportunities, and conversations that would have never interested you before. This is not random. It is your inner world redirecting your outer life. When you outgrow old limitations, you unlock paths that were invisible to your former self. You attract experiences that match your clarity, your peace, your new values. But allowing these new things into your life requires trust. Trust that letting go is not abandonment, but alignment. Trust that new connections will come even if you cannot see them yet. Trust that the universe never leaves an empty space without the intention of filling it with something better suited to your evolution. Sometimes the new arrives in unexpected ways. A chance meeting, a deep conversation with a stranger, a sudden opportunity that feels perfectly timed. These moments are not coincidences. They are responses to the inner changes you have made. Your energy shifts, and the world shifts with you. You attract what matches your frequency. Another important aspect is recognizing that the people who enter your life after you evolve are often reflections of your inner growth. They meet you not in your wounds, but in your wisdom. They connect with your authenticity rather than your fears. They see you for who you are becoming instead of who you used to be. These relationships tend to be more balanced, more reciprocal, more meaningful. They challenge you not to stay small, but to continue expanding. Outgrowing others is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of aligned connection. It is an invitation to step into relationships, experiences, and environments that support your highest self. What feels like loss at first eventually reveals itself as transformation. Growth clears away the noise so the right voices can find you. It clears away the clutter so the right paths can open. When you allow this process to happen naturally, you step into a life where the people around you inspire you, the experiences around you enrich you, and the world around you finally reflects the truth of who you are becoming.